Good morning, Algebra 1 students. Today we're going to be going over the Unit 5 performance task. So I would suggest that before we go over it, I want you to go ahead and read it, see if you can make sense of it, and try to do some of it on your own. But I'll be covering the whole thing, and hopefully it'll make sense. And basically everything I write, make sure you write down, okay? Now, in this case, yours is going to be a little bit different than mine because it relies on survey data. So depending on how your survey goes, that's going to change how you want to answer the questions. So and I'll explain that kind of as we go. But hopefully it'll still make sense, and hopefully you'll be able to still get through it. Okay? So let me go ahead and present my screen here. And then we're going to go ahead and look here. And for the performance task, it starts on page 57. Okay, so on your workbook, your Unit 5 workbook, page 57. For this task, you will need to survey at least 10 friends, family members, or peers at your school. Use the table below to chart people's responses. Use tally marks. Ask your friends how many times do they access the following media applications on a daily basis. So you can see you need to ask at least 10 people. Now, if you ask more than 10 people, that's great. But you need at least 10 people. And you ask them, well, how many times do you access Twitter per day? How many times do you access Facebook? How many times are you texting in a day? How many times are you looking at email? How many times are you accessing your Instagram per day? So I just made up some data. I just put some points here, but I actually want you to actually ask people to put in this information. So don't just copy mine. So ideally, you want to be able to ask people how many times and get actual data on this information. Okay. So, but I just made mine up. I didn't ask anybody. And I kind of just filled it out like this. So I kind of did my best estimate of what I would expect people to say. So for Twitter, quite a few people don't have Twitter or rarely look at it. So I put 4 right here, then 0 to 2, 3 to 6, I put it 4, and then 7 or more, I put 2 people saying that. Okay. Again, I just made up this information, this data, but I'm kind of using my best guess as what people might say. So for texting, I put everyone, all 10 people in the 7 or more times a day. I feel like most people look at their text or send more than 7 texts in a day usually. For email, some young people usually don't check their email that much, but older people tend to check their email a lot more, especially if they need it for work, and so on. So I kind of just filled it out as we go. I kind of just made it up, but yours should actually be actual data. Okay. Now let's go ahead and start answering the questions. So create a bar graph or histogram. And it says a bar graph with horizontal lines. This is not what a histogram is. I don't know why it says that. With the data from your table, remember to choose the labels for your X and Y axis and label appropriately. So what I would do is we're going to go ahead and make a chart. And what I would say is make sure these lines look pretty straight. So I would like for you to use a straight edge, ideally, so that you can make this look really nice, okay? But what we're going to do is along the y-axis, we're going to put the numbers 1 through 10, okay? And I want them kind of evenly spaced. So if this is 0 down here, then 1 maybe is here, 2, and I want to try to make that gap an equal gap, right? So don't do like 1, 2, and then 3 is all the way up here. See how that gap's too big? You want these gaps between these points to be ideally the same. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. And you could put numbers here to these. 1, 2, 3, 4, And then on the bottom, we're going to put right here 0 to 2. And then over here, 3 to 6. And this is 7 or more. Okay, these are the same vertical categories you have here. 0 to 2 times per day, 3 to 6 times per day, 7 or more times per day. Okay, so then for here, we're actually going to have quite a few columns. So we're going to have first, we're going to put all of these columns for the 0 to 2. We're going to have a column for Twitter, Facebook, texting, email, and Instagram. So Twitter, Facebook. So Twitter was 4, Facebook 3. So the first one column I'm going to put is up to 4. And this is Twitter. So I'm going to put a TW here for Twitter. Okay. Then for Facebook, it was 3, right? So for Facebook, I'll make another column. Notice this one only goes up to 3. So this one I'll put Facebook. So I'll put FB for Facebook. Then texting was 0. Then email is 2. Instagram is 1. So I'll leave a space for texting, but we know that that's 0. Maybe I'll put a TX for texting, but we know it's at 0, so it's here. And then what was it for email? It was 2 respondents, Instagram 1. So I'll make another column that goes up to 2. And this is for email, right? So we'll put EM for email. And then lastly, only 1 respondent for the 0 to 2 for Instagram. So we'll put I for Instagram. Okay, so this tells us when we look at this chart, 4 people said that they accessed Twitter 0 to 2 times. 3 people said they accessed Facebook 0 to 2 times. Now yours will look different because it's based on your data, okay? This is just based off of my data that I made up, but your data should have different columns here, okay? Should have different heights for whatever people responded to these, to your interview questions, okay? Now 3 to 6, now we make the same. We make a Twitter column, a Facebook column, texting, email, and Instagram column, okay, for each, for the 3 to 6. So now we're looking at this group. So 4 for Twitter, 6 for Facebook. So here we'll do 4 for Twitter again. So this is for Twitter. And then how many was it for Facebook? 6 for Facebook. Okay, so my Facebook column goes up to 6 to here. Okay. And if you're using a straight edge, you should be able to make these columns look nice and neat. Mine doesn't look that neat. Texting again, 0. Then email 3 and 5 for Instagram. So 0 for texting. 3 and then 5. 3. For email. That's an E, M, email. And then 5 for Instagram. An I for Instagram. Okay. Then do the same for the 7 or more section, okay? And again, yours will look different based on the data you have. But it should look something like this, where you have these columns and you're kind of organizing it this way. Okay. Now for part B, it says list 3 observations from your data. So again, your observations will be different based on your data, but I could write some ones that I see from my data. So I would say, one thing I could say is everybody texts 7 or more times per day. So every one of my respondents, every respondent texts 7 or more times per day. Okay. All right. What's another thing we could say? From my information, it looks like for my respondents, Instagram is more popular than Twitter, right? See, well, Twitter has more in the 0 to 2 and the 3 to 6, whereas Instagram has more in the 3 to 6 and the 7 or more. So we would say from my respondents use Instagram more than Twitter, right? So that would be another example I could put in my observations. Okay, now yours will be different. Again, I want to emphasize that. Don't copy mine. Yours will be different based on your data, but that's the type of observations you want to be looking for. Okay. Okay, and then you'll have a third observation as well. So example of another observation I might see is Twitter seems to be more evenly distributed than other categories. That would be another thing I could say, right? Okay. So probabilities. What is the probability that a student accesses Facebook 3 or more times per day? So I'm looking at Facebook and I'm looking for 3 or more times per day. So for Facebook, 3 or more is including both of these categories, right? Because this is 3 to 6 and this is 7 or more. So everything here is 3 or more in both of these columns here, or both these sections here. So that would be a total of 6 plus 1, that's 7 out of my 10 respondents. So the probability that someone accesses Facebook 3 or more times, well, that was 7 of my respondents out of 10. Again, yours will be different based on the number of respondents, but you're basically looking at those two boxes in the chart. What is the probability that a student sends 7 or more texts a day and checks their posts on Twitter 3 or more times per day? Well, this question actually doesn't really make that much sense because we don't know the probability that someone does both of those because we didn't assign names to the tally marks, right? We would only be able to know if they do both is if we know that they're in both of those categories. But in my case, I know that everyone texts 7 or more times per day. I know that this is 100% of the people, right? So I know every respondent in my case texted 7 or more times per day. So we need to just check how much they checks or posts on Twitter more than 3 times per day. It should say 3 or more times per day, but that's okay. So we want Twitter checks 3 or more times per day. Again, that's both of these two boxes because both of these groups look at their Twitter 3 or more times per day. So that would be a total of 4 plus 2. That's 6 out of my 10 respondents. Okay. And I would then multiply. I think this is what they want you to do, even though this is incorrect. Here's what I would do to make this problem the best. Just ignore this. We'll say, what is the probability that a student, and we'll just delete this section. Okay. Checks or posts on Twitter more than 3 times per day. Okay. Do any of the categories have a probability of 0? If so, which one and why? If not, what would you need to get a probability of 0? So in my case, there's a couple of sections that have probability 0, meaning 0 of the respondents put their answer there. So that would be texting the 0 to 2 times per day and the 3 to 6 times per day. So my probability of 0, we would say the probability that someone texts we could just say 0 to 6 times per day. Okay, this one has this probability I'm saying here has a probability of 0 because both of these rectangles have 0 respondents in them. So the probability that I choose someone who texts 0 to 6 times per day, that's these two boxes. Well, what's the probability that someone lands in there? Well, from my survey, that's 0. But your survey might be different. You might have some people in here, all right? But basically, you'd pick some box that has nobody in it. So you would pick a box that has no respondents in it, and you could say what the probability of basically landing in that category. Okay. Do any of the categories have a probability of 1? If so, which one and why? If not, what would you need? So in my case, it's if everyone picked a certain category. So in my case, all 10 of my respondents ended up in this box, right, out of the texting. So every one of my respondents said that they text 7 or more times per day. So in that case, I would say the probability that someone ends up in that box is 1, because a probability of 1, it means it's a guarantee. So from my respondents, it's a guarantee that you've landed in this box. So I could say the probability that someone texts 7 or more times per day is 1. So the probability that someone texts 7 or more times per day is 1. Okay. And that's because all my respondents chose that they text 7 or more times per day. Now, again, your data might be a little bit different. So you want to look for, are any of your boxes, did all of your respondents end up in one of those boxes? If so, you could say that that probability is 1. Okay, and that's it. And that's it. Make sure you're answering in complete sentences when you're listing your observations and putting complete sentences here. And that's basically it. Now, again, yours will be different based on the information you gather from your respondents, but it shouldn't be too crazy. Shouldn't be too crazy. Anyway, well, with that, take care, and I'll see you guys next time.